Good evening. Tonight, the world's attention is fixed on New York, where history was made at the United Nations. Today, former President Donald Trump made a dramatic return to the United Nations General Assembly, electrifying the world stage and reigniting fierce debate. On September 25, 2025, world leaders from every corner of the globe gathered in New York, expecting a day of routine diplomacy. But instead they witnessed a political shockwave that reverberated far beyond the UN walls. Trump's address was not a call for unity or compromise. Instead, it was a defiant declaration of his America First ideology, delivered with unmistakable conviction. He seized the global platform to relitigate his presidency, celebrate his most controversial decisions, and promote a deeply nationalistic worldview that challenged the very foundation of international cooperation. The General Assembly Hall was thick with tension. What began as polite applause quickly faded into uneasy silence and anxious whispers among delegates. Trump presented himself as a prophet vindicated by recent events, claiming he was right on issues from energy independence to border security. His tone was unapologetic, blunt, and at times confrontational, leaving no room for doubt about his intentions. He wasn't just speaking to the leaders in the room. Trump's words were aimed at his loyal base back home and a global audience watching closely, signaling that his brand of politics remains potent and influential on the world stage. The speech served as a stark reminder of the deep divisions that define our era, both within nations and between them, fueling passionate reactions and renewed debate. Diplomats struggled to respond in real time, some openly critical, others left bewildered and uncertain about the future of international cooperation. Trump's message was clear and uncompromising. The era of globalism is over, and the future, he declared, belongs to strong, sovereign nations willing to put their own interests first. With this speech, Trump directly challenged the post-World War II international order, questioning the very principles that have guided global relations for decades. Tonight, we break down what he said, why it matters, and how the world is responding to this seismic moment. Let's dive in. One of the most forceful and controversial parts of Trump's speech was his uncompromising attack on immigration, a topic that has defined much of his political career. He declared that open-door migration policies are, in his words, national suicide, painting a grim and urgent picture of countries being overrun, their borders erased, and their cultures diluted beyond recognition. Trump held up his border wall as the only sensible solution, framing immigration not just as a policy debate but as a fundamental question of national survival and identity. He argued that without strong borders, a nation cannot protect its people or its values. He urged leaders from around the globe to reject international migration agreements, warning that such pacts undermine sovereignty and security, and instead called for hardline stances that prioritize their own citizens above all else. "A nation without borders is not a nation at all," he repeated, a familiar rallying cry for his base, and a phrase that resonated throughout the chamber, echoing his America First philosophy. Leaders from countries like Germany and Canada, who have championed refugee resettlement and open migration, sat stone-faced, their expressions betraying deep disagreement and concern. Trump dismissed their worldview as naive and even dangerous, offering no room for nuance or acknowledgement of the complex reasons why people flee their homes, such as war, persecution, or poverty. His rhetoric was a direct rebuke to the UN's mission on refugees and migration, challenging the very foundation of international cooperation on humanitarian issues. By championing fortified borders and unapologetic nationalist self-interest, he challenged the idea of shared global responsibility, insisting that every nation must look after its own first. The silence from many delegations spoke volumes, reflecting both shock and disapproval, as well as the deep divisions his words exposed. The chamber witnessed a dramatic collision between two fundamentally different visions for the world, one of walls and self-preservation, the other of bridges and shared responsibility. Trump's message was clear and unwavering: keep people out, protect your own, and never apologize for putting your country first. The divide was immediate and unmistakable, leaving the world to grapple with which vision will ultimately shape the future of global migration. After taking office, Trump set his sights on climate change, openly dismissing the overwhelming scientific consensus that the planet is warming due to human activity. He famously referred to climate change as the greatest con job ever, ridiculing the science and the experts behind it. Trump claimed that decades of research were nothing more than a hoax, designed to undermine the American economy and empower so-called global elites at the expense of ordinary citizens. He openly mocked countries investing in green energy, warning that such efforts would lead to economic collapse, job losses, and industries that could no longer compete on the world stage. Instead, Trump celebrated the oil, coal, and gas industries, calling fossil fuels the true path to national strength and prosperity, and urging the world to ignore what he called alarmist climate warnings. This combative stance put him in direct opposition to nearly every other world leader and the UN Secretary General, who viewed climate change as an urgent global crisis. While leaders from around the world pleaded for bold climate action, Trump poured scorn on their efforts, dismissing their warnings and calls for cooperation. His words and actions directly challenged the Paris Agreement and every major international climate accord, signaling a dramatic shift in U.S. policy. Scientists and environmental groups quickly condemned his remarks, pointing to the mounting evidence of real-world climate impacts, raging wildfires, devastating floods, and record-breaking heat waves. For leaders of vulnerable island nations, Trump's speech was more than just rhetoric. It was a denial of the existential threats they faced from rising seas and extreme weather. The divide on climate policy had never been clearer, with Trump standing alone against a world united in the fight against climate change. On foreign policy, Trump's message was self-vindication. "I was right about everything." He claimed his presidency brought peace and stability by breaking with tradition and prioritizing America first. Trump argued that strength, not alliances or international law, is what matters. He criticized NATO, insisting his tough demands made the world safer, though critics say he weakened alliances. Trump celebrated direct deals with strongman leaders, dismissing multilateral diplomacy as irrelevant. For many allies, this vision was unsettling, a world led by unpredictable power, not shared rules. Trump's foreign policy is based on personal instinct and short-term American interests. The message "real power belongs to strong nations, not international institutions." For many, this vision signals a more chaotic and dangerous world order. On Ukraine, Trump surprised some by supporting its right to reclaim all territory from Russia. But he quickly pivoted to scold America's allies, accusing Europe, especially Germany, of not doing enough. He blasted them for buying Russian energy, claiming they were funding both sides of the war. Trump extended criticism to China and India for propping up Russia's economy. His message, the world's response to Russia is weak, and only he will speak the hard truth. This public shaming of allies is classic Trump, but many diplomats see it as divisive and counterproductive. Trump offered no detailed plan for Ukraine, just demands that others do more. The speech left allies wondering, would he increase support or retreat behind America first? More questions than answers. The uncertainty lingers. Trump proudly defended controversial military actions, including the U.S. strike on Iranian nuclear facilities. He claimed these actions led to a ceasefire with Israel and showed American resolve. Trump presented unilateral military force as a primary tool of foreign policy, not a last resort. He defended U.S. operations in Venezuela targeting drug networks, dismissing legal and human rights concerns. For Trump, these were necessary actions to protect America. His message under his leadership, the U.S. would not be constrained by international norms. Critics fear this approach could lead to global instability and unchecked escalation. Trump argued that real change comes through strength and the willingness to use it. Supporters see strong leadership, critics see a recipe for chaos. Trump's stance, peace through overwhelming force. The world took note. On the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Trump was uncompromising. He opposes international recognition of a Palestinian state. He argued that statehood rewards terrorism, citing Hamas, and dismissed the two-state solution. This position breaks with global consensus and challenges decades of peace efforts. Trump framed the conflict solely as a security issue, ignoring Palestinian aspirations and rights. His stance was celebrated by Israeli hardliners and U.S. evangelical supporters. They point to the Abraham Accords as proof his approach works. Palestinian leaders and allies condemned the policy as denying self-determination and fueling extremism. Trump's speech signaled the U.S. would abandon any pretense of being an honest broker. Instead, America would stand firmly with Israel, regardless of diplomatic fallout. The divide deepened. Throughout his speech, Trump launched a biting critique of the United Nations itself. He called the UN bloated, bureaucratic, and ineffective, a talking shop that fails to solve real problems. Trump cited crises in Gaza, Ukraine, and Sudan as evidence of UN failure. He argued the organization's slow processes and weak resolutions make it irrelevant. Trump's solution: let powerful nations act, rather than wait for global consensus. His critique resonated with those frustrated by diplomatic gridlock but went further, questioning the UN's very purpose. For diplomats, this was a direct assault on their work and the institution's value. Trump painted the UN as an obstacle, a relic of failed globalism. His message: national power should trump international cooperation. The institution he addressed was under attack from its own stage. The aftermath of Trump's speech was quiet chaos. Applause was thin. Shock and disbelief filled the room. Cameras captured world leaders' faces. Resignation, anger, and concern. One ambassador called the speech a wrecking ball through the UN's principles. Trump's claims were quickly challenged and fact-checked by experts worldwide. His dismissal of climate change was called a betrayal by vulnerable nations. Allies rebutted his attacks, stressing unity in the face of global threats. Human rights groups and Arab nations condemned his hardline stances. The speech united much of the world in opposition to Trump's message. It was confrontational, nationalistic, and polarizing, playing to his base, alienating partners. The world saw two competing visions: international cooperation versus raw national power. On the UN's biggest stage, those visions collided.